is Julia Kempton, and this week's story concerns Native American business development and Indigenous tourism in the United States. Last week, the Economic Impact of Indigenous Tourism report, released by the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association, or the AIANNH-Owned, found that 1 in 4 American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian-owned firms are supported by the tourism industry. It also said that the native hospitality industry supports 117,852 jobs in Indian country, across more than 40,000 companies, and when all factors are considered, Native American tourism is a $14 billion industry. The 23rd Annual American Indian Tourism Conference was hosted at the Wekapo Casino Resort in Fort McDowell, Arizona, on Yavapai land, where the AIANTA also announced a 5-year partnership with the National Park Service. It came less than a month after the AIANTA joined a new and long overdue group called the Indigenous Tourism Collaborative of the Americas, which shares crucial resources across diverse Indigenous groups, focusing on tourism in North, Central, and South America. The Indigenous Tourism Collaborative of the Americas will be substantially funded by an act of the U.S. Congress from 2016. Many of the indigenous tourism companies specifically located in the United States are also eligible for additional grants from the Division of Economic Development at the Indian Affairs Office in the U.S. Department of the Interior. After centuries of discrimination and underinvestment, Native American territories and reservations in the United States are often dangerously economically depressed and include some of the poorest counties in the country. Sustainable development programs in these communities, defined by the U.S. government and many community office holders as Indian country, are essential to the economic revitalization, but they must focus on Indigenous-led efforts. For instance, at the Cherokee Nation Reservation in northeastern Oklahoma, the Cherokee Nation's Cultural Tourism Program has funded museums and plaques commemorating and memorializing significant events and figures in the history of Cherokee Nation, spread across nearly 7,000 square miles. The program's director has said that one of the most important parts of creating sustainable tourism development is engaging Indigenous stakeholders. While tourism has existed in some form on Cherokee land for decades, it is only in recent years that Cherokee-owned industries have marketed themselves to a wider audience. Museums in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, essentially the regional capital, which have been supported by this local development program, include the Cherokee National History Museum, the Cherokee National Supreme Court Museum, and the Cherokee National Prison Museum. While the tourism industry has its fair share of flaws, Indigenous tourism can raise revenues and support rural Indigenous communities while teaching visitors about Indigenous customs and history. In that sense, it can specifically combat centuries of cultural repression perpetrated by non-Indigenous Americans in this country and educate non-Native visitors about centuries of genocide and systemic discrimination which devastated Indigenous communities in these United States, whose legacy is perpetuated in economic inequality and discrimination to this day. Indigenous tourism had been growing exponentially prior to the pandemic, increasing by 180% between 2007 and 2017 in the United States, and in Canada at that time, it was outpacing overall tourism growth by nearly 24%. If done ethically and carefully and hyperlocally, it can serve as a positive example of local rural development in the United States and beyond. In that sense, it supports UN's Sustainable Development Goals number 8, decent work and economic growth, and number 10, reduce inequalities. That's the news for this week, and now, on to the meeting.